Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. If you love gripping tales that stir your emotions and leave you with something to think about, you're in the right place. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. That Saturday morning started with sunlight spilling softly through the cream curtains of our Lagos apartment, and the faint hum of traffic from the street below. I was curled up on the sofa sipping tea while Daniel was in the kitchen, humming off-key to a song on the radio. For 7 years I had loved that sound, the casual comfort of his presence. That morning though, he was more upbeat than usual. He'd gotten the promotion he'd been eyeing for months. He'd called me from work the day before, his voice full of pride, telling me that the company's board had approved him as senior project manager. I was thrilled for him. Maybe even more than he was for himself. So when he left that morning for urgent client follow-ups, I decided to do something special. My music students had all canceled for the day, and that gave me free time. I rushed to the bakery and bought a cake with 3 layers, frosted in chocolate, with "Congratulations, my love," piped in gold icing. I also picked up a small gift, a vintage leather-bound notebook I had been saving up to buy him, thinking he could jot down his big project ideas in it. I wrapped it in deep blue paper, tied it with a satin ribbon, and placed it in a neat paper bag. My plan was simple: surprise him at the office, make his colleagues see how proud I was of him, and maybe take him out for lunch. When I got to Westfield and Partners, the building gleamed in the midday sun. The lobby smelled faintly of fresh paint and expensive cologne. I signed in at the front desk, my heart bouncing with anticipation. The receptionist, a slim young man with wire-rimmed glasses, gave me a polite smile but hesitated when I told him I was there to see Daniel. He asked me to wait a moment and made a call, speaking in low tones. When he hung up, there was a flicker in his expression, something between discomfort and curiosity that I chose to ignore. I took the elevator up to the top floor, the cake balanced carefully in my hands, the gift bag swinging gently on my wrist. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed how quiet it was. The carpet muffled my footsteps. Sunlight spilled across the glass walls of the executive offices, making everything seem almost too bright. Daniel's door was at the far end. I was about to knock when I heard laughter, a woman's laughter, light and intimate. My hand froze midair. It was followed by Daniel's voice, softer than I'd ever heard it, saying something I couldn't quite make out. I pressed my ear closer to the door, my stomach tightening. The next sound was unmistakable. A sigh, then the wet, tender noise of a kiss. For a moment my mind rejected it outright. It couldn't be. Not him. Not Daniel. I pushed the door open before my body even caught up to my thoughts. There they were, Daniel and Evelyn Grant, his boss, the woman I'd heard him praise in casual conversations at home. She was perched on the edge of his desk, her hands cupping his face, his arms locked around her waist. The sight was both cinematic and sickening. Her lipstick smeared slightly, his tie loosened, their faces flushed with the kind of joy I had thought was ours alone. Daniel's eyes widened when he saw me, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Evelyn slid off the desk, smoothing her pencil skirt, her expression a strange mix of annoyance and amusement. I couldn't speak. The cake in my hand suddenly felt ridiculous, absurdly heavy. My gaze dropped to it, to the neat gold letters that mocked me now. My chest burned, my breath shallow, and my vision blurred, but I forced myself to swallow hard and lift my chin. "So this is how you celebrate your promotion," I said, my voice trembling but clear. Daniel stammered something, an excuse, a plea. I don't even remember, but I didn't wait to hear the rest. I placed the cake gently on the desk between them, set the gift bag beside it, and turned to leave. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each step a fragile act of dignity. The elevator doors closed behind me, and only then did the tears come, hot and unrelenting. By the time I reached the lobby, my face was streaked, my hands trembling so badly I could barely press the button for the parking lot. Outside, the city was still alive, cars honking, vendors calling, but inside me, something had gone still and cold. Driving home, My thoughts came in sharp fragments. The way he'd been working late more often. The extra cologne. The new gym membership he said was for health. I realized I had been ignoring the signs, trusting him blindly because that's what love had meant to me. Now, that trust felt like a weapon turned against me. When I got home, I sat in the living room without turning on the lights. My piano stood in the corner, silent and gleaming. I stared at it for a long time, thinking of all the songs I had composed while waiting for Daniel to come home from work. Waiting for a man who, as it turned out, had been spending his time with someone else. That night, I didn't cry again. I didn't rage or call him. I just sat there, a plan beginning to form in the quiet. If Daniel thought he could betray me and walk away unscathed, he was wrong. Very wrong. The next morning, Daniel sent me a string of apologetic texts. They ranged from frantic explanations to pathetic pleas how it just happened, how it meant nothing, how he was under a lot of stress, and Evelyn understood. I didn't reply to a single one. I knew if I allowed him space to manipulate me, I might get sucked into that web again. Instead, I muted his number, sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, and began digging. I started with our joint bank account. The first thing that hit me was a charge for a luxury weekend at a resort in Obudu listed under corporate retreat. Funny, because Daniel never mentioned going there, and he certainly hadn't taken me. Then came the expensive dinners, designer clothing stores, and spa visits. Each one felt like a sharp blade sliding between my ribs. My income from teaching piano was steady, but Daniel earned more, so I'd never paid close attention to how he spent. I realized now how foolish that trust had been. By mid-afternoon, I was printing out bank statements, credit card records, and receipts. I kept them neatly organized in a folder, each expense highlighted and annotated. I wasn't sure yet how I'd use them, but I knew I needed a paper trail. My pulse quickened when I found a flight booking for 2 Lagos to Cape Town scheduled just 2 months earlier. The seats were next to each other in business class. I checked my calendar. That was the same weekend Daniel had claimed to be at a regional conference. For 2 days, I quietly played detective. I combed through his social media, his work emails on the shared tablet, even the trash folder. I discovered a string of messages to Evelyn, inside jokes, late-night confessions, flirty banter. But it was the photographs that made my stomach turn. Candid selfies of them at the resort, Evelyn in a swimsuit leaning into him, his hand resting intimately on her thigh. On the 3rd day, I got an unexpected call from an unfamiliar number. The woman on the line introduced herself as Clara Nwosu, a senior accountant at Westfield and Partners. She spoke quickly, nervously, as if afraid someone might overhear. She told me she'd see me at the office that day, and after what she'd witnessed over the past year, she couldn't keep quiet any longer. Evelyn and Daniel's affair wasn't just personal, it was professional misconduct. Company funds had been used to finance their little getaways. Clara suspected falsified invoices and fraudulent expense claims. Why tell me? I asked, still wary. Because women like Evelyn think they can use their position to destroy people's homes and get away with it, she said. And because you deserve to know the truth. She offered to send me copies of the company's internal expense reports, emails, and even a recording she had accidentally overheard in the office lounge. By the next morning, a secure file landed in my inbox, loaded with damning evidence. It was more than I could have hoped for: hotel receipts billed as client accommodation, high-end restaurant tabs marked working dinners, flight tickets approved under urgent site visits. The recording was the nail in the coffin. Daniel and Evelyn openly discussing how to manipulate the project budget so they could celebrate in Zanzibar without raising suspicion. The betrayal now wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal, and deeply unethical. And I was determined to make sure they paid for it. I researched divorce lawyers, reading reviews until I found the perfect one. Loretta Kane. Her reputation was as fierce as her courtroom presence. Known for dismantling high-profile cheaters and leaving them with nothing but their own shame. She was exactly who I needed. At our first meeting, I laid out my evidence. Loretta listened without interrupting, her eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. When we're done, she said finally, Daniel won't just lose his marriage. He'll lose his career, his reputation, and every ounce of credibility he's built. We mapped out the plan carefully. Step 1. Secure all the financial and personal evidence before Daniel could destroy it. Step 2. File for divorce citing adultery, financial misconduct, and fraud. Step 3. Coordinate with Clara to leak the story internally to the board of directors. Step 4. Serve the divorce papers publicly at the company's upcoming corporate gala. The same night Daniel was scheduled to give the keynote speech celebrating his promotion. For weeks I played my role perfectly. I didn't confront Daniel directly. I let him think I was licking my wounds in silence. He started sending flowers, leaving voice notes about working on us, and promising to cut things off with Evelyn. I ignored him, storing every message in a separate folder that Loretta labeled manipulation attempts. Clara became my quiet ally inside the company. She slipped me updates on Evelyn's mounting paranoia and Daniel's overconfidence. Apparently, Evelyn thought the scandal would blow over, and that she could protect Daniel from internal scrutiny. She was wrong. The board had already begun looking into expense discrepancies. The night before the gala, Loretta called me. Everything is lined up, she said. Tomorrow, you'll get your closure and they'll get their reckoning. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying that moment in Daniel's office, the way his eyes had widened in shock. This time I wanted that same shock, but in front of everyone who mattered to him. The night of the gala, I stood in front of my mirror, fastening a pair of gold earrings I hadn't worn in years. My dress was a deep emerald green, the kind that caught the light in every movement. My hair was swept up neatly, my makeup precise. I wanted to walk into that ballroom looking like a woman who had already won, because in my heart I had. The event was at one of Lagos' most prestigious hotels, the kind with crystal chandeliers and marble floors that seemed to stretch forever. When I stepped out of the cab, the valet gave me a curious glance, probably wondering why I was arriving alone to such a high-profile corporate affair. Inside, the air buzzed with polite laughter, clinking glasses, and the faint hum of a live jazz band. I spotted Daniel immediately. He was at the center of a group near the stage, his suit crisp, his smile polished. Evelyn was beside him in a shimmering silver gown, her hand resting casually on his arm. They looked like the golden couple of the night until I reminded myself of the rot underneath that glitter. Loretta was already there, mingling discreetly near the back with an envelope in her hand. She caught my eye, gave the slightest nod, and melted back into the crowd. The speeches began, the company's CEO praising Daniel's leadership and vision. I could almost laugh at the irony. Then came Daniel's turn. He walked up to the podium, adjusting the mic, and began his speech about integrity and commitment to excellence. Every word was a lie, and I stood there, my heart pounding with anticipation. When he finished, the applause swelled, and that's when Loretta stepped forward. She crossed the room with calm precision and handed Daniel a large white envelope. His brow furrowed as he opened it. Inside were the divorce papers, stapled neatly on top of the financial and photographic evidence of his affair. For a moment the room held its breath. Daniel's face drained of color, his mouth opening slightly as his eyes flicked to me. I didn't move. I simply met his gaze, tilting my head in a silent acknowledgement. I know. And now so does everyone else. The murmur of the crowd grew louder as people began to notice the papers in his hands. Evelyn leaned over to glance at them, her confident smile freezing mid-expression. Her grip on his arm loosened. A senior board member stepped forward, looking from the documents to Daniel with open disapproval. The CEO's expression had turned stone cold. I turned to leave just as Clara, my quiet hero, slipped a small flash drive into the hand of one of the board members. She had brought her own insurance recordings, reports, and a full log of every misappropriated naira. It would be impossible for Daniel and Evelyn to talk their way out of this one. As I walked toward the exit, I heard snippets of voices behind me, sharp, urgent, accusing. The click of cameras from a few journalists who had been covering the event punctuated the chaos. Daniel's name, once spoken with admiration, now floated through the air in hushed, scandalized tones. Outside, the night air felt cool against my skin. I hailed a cab and slid into the back seat, my pulse finally beginning to settle. By the time I reached home, my phone was buzzing with messages from friends who had been at the gala, colleagues, even a few strangers who had somehow already heard the news. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's downfall was swift and merciless. The board forced his resignation. Evelyn was quietly removed from her position, and a full audit was launched into their expenses. Daniel tried to reach out calls, letters, even showing up at my building, but Loretta's legal team ensured all communication went through her office. I didn't have to hear his voice again. With the settlement finalized, I was free. I used part of the funds to renovate my apartment, turning the spare room into a music studio. I began teaching more students, composing pieces that carried the weight of my journey. Some were slow and mournful, others bright and triumphant, but all of them were mine. It was during one of my weekend piano recitals that I met Samuel Adeyemi, a soft-spoken bookstore owner who had come to hear a student's performance. He lingered afterward, asking about the story behind one of my pieces. Over time, our conversations stretched into hours, often over cups of tea in his quiet little shop. There was no rush, no performance, just two people meeting each other exactly as they were. Months later, I stood in that same living room where I had once sat in the dark, numb and broken. Only now, sunlight streamed through the windows, my piano was open, and laughter of my own filled the space. I realized then that my life had not ended in that office on the day I caught Daniel. It had only just begun. To everyone listening, I'll say this. Betrayal can shatter you, but it can also remake you. It can strip away the illusions and leave you standing stronger than you ever thought possible. Moral lesson. Sometimes the deepest wounds carve out the space for our greatest strength. Betrayal is not the end. It's an invitation to rebuild, wiser and braver than before. When trust is broken, you have the right to demand accountability, to protect your peace, and to choose yourself above all else. Justice doesn't always arrive in silence. Sometimes it walks into a crowded room and takes the microphone from the liar's hand. And in that moment, you're not just surviving, you're standing in the truth you created. Hello guys, thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, made you think, or gave you the courage to face your own battles, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment about what you learned or how you'd have handled it. Until next time, keep your heart strong and your standards higher.